Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we deliver the crucial context you need to become instantly well-informed. Today, we are really getting into the structure of how knowledge gets made, specifically qualitative research. It often sounds complex, maybe even a bit intimidating, but we found this great quote in our sources: "Complexity is the refuge of the powerful."
That really hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Qualitative research can seem foggy, very academic, but our mission today is simple. Cut through that fog. We want you to see it not just as, collecting stories, but as this rigorous, structured way of understanding the world, and one built on some pretty deep philosophical choices.
Absolutely. If you've ever read, say, a business case study or something in sociology, maybe education research, and thought, okay, but why did they talk to these people? Or why this method and not another? Then this deep dive is, well, it's kind of your shortcut. We're laying out the framework for understanding how we learn things when we can't just, count them up.
Exactly. That's the fundamental split, isn't it? Quantitative research is all about measurement. How many? How often? What's the average?
Right. It asks how many students pass the test.
Yeah. Whereas qualitative research, it goes for depth. Context, meaning is asking, what does passing or failing actually feel like for those students? What does that experience mean? It's trying to grasp human reality, which, let's face it, is messy. It doesn't always fit in neat boxes.
Okay. So the goal today is twofold. First, we need that structure, the ability to tell these 5 main approaches apart. But before that, we need to tackle these hidden philosophical choices. You called it the research operating system.
That's right, the hidden OS. Because before any researcher asks a single question or observes anything, they're already working from a set of core beliefs. You just can't start without them.
Even if they don't explicitly state them.
Even then. Yeah. They're always there, guiding the process.
Yeah.
Every study starts with these unavoidable assumptions. Assumptions about what reality is, how we can know it, and what role values play. We can actually break this down into 4 sort of core questions.
Okay, let's unpack this OS. What's the first big one?
First up, ontology.
Yeah.
Big word, simple idea. What is reality? Is there just one single objective truth out there, like, gravity, just waiting for us to discover it? Or are there multiple realities, truths that are maybe local, specific to a culture, a context, even an individual?
Okay. So, is good leadership one universal thing, or does it look totally different depending on whether you're in, say, a tech startup versus a hospital?
Exactly that.
Right.
And your answer shapes everything. If you believe in one universal truth, you'll try to find generalizable laws. But if you lean towards multiple realities, a relativist ontology, then you'll focus really hard on the specific context, believing that's where the truth lies for that situation.
Wow. Okay. That distinction alone really makes you think. I think most of us probably default to the one truth idea without realizing it. So if ontology is about what reality is, what's next?
Next comes epistemology. How do we actually know things, given our view of reality?
How do we gain knowledge?
Right. Is knowledge something we discover by standing back, being objective, measuring carefully, like a scientist in a lab? Or is knowledge something that's, co-created, something that emerges from the interaction between the researcher and the person they're studying, like in a deep conversation?
Okay, but here's where I sometimes get stuck. If I have a really open-ended interview with someone, isn't the knowledge we create together really subjective? How does qualitative research defend against that idea that it's just opinion, not hard fact?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it gets right to the heart of qualitative work. If you adopt an ontology that says reality is subjective or socially built, then your epistemology has to match. You have to accept that knowing is also subjective or intersubjective. You don't defend the work by claiming universal objectivity, because that wasn't the goal. Instead, you demonstrate rigor through things like plausibility, credibility, showing your work, making sure the interpretation deeply reflects the participants' experiences in that context. The goal isn't prediction like in science, it's understanding. Deep, nuanced understanding.
Okay, that reframing helps. It's not aiming for the same kind of truth. Got it.
What's the third assumption?
Third is axiology. This one's about values. What role do the researchers' own values play?
Should they try to be completely neutral, like a fly on the wall, pretend their own beliefs and background don't influence anything?
Or should they acknowledge that values inevitably shape the research? Maybe even state their position up front?
That feels, more honest, actually.
Yeah.
Especially when studying people. Is true objectivity even possible then? Many qualitative researchers would argue it isn't, not fully. So transparency becomes key. For instance, researchers using what's called a transformative framework are very open about it. They'll state clearly that their work is driven by values like social justice or equity. They believe research should challenge inequality and empower marginalized groups. Their values actively shape the questions they ask, who they talk to, and how they interpret the findings.
So acknowledging the values makes the research potentially more powerful, or at least more transparent about its aims. Okay. And the last assumption.
Finally, methodology. This is the how-to. How do we actually go about doing the study? Does it follow fixed, predefined steps like a recipe? Or is the design more flexible, more organic, something that evolves as you learn?
And this connects back to the other assumptions, right?
Directly. If you believe reality is stable and knowable, your ontology, you'll likely use fixed, structured methods. Think surveys, experiments. But if you believe reality is complex, subjective, maybe even co-created, different ontology, epistemology, then your methodology needs to be flexible, emergent. The plan has to adapt as you go. That's really a hallmark of good qualitative research.
Okay, so the big takeaway here for you listening is that research isn't some purely objective, neutral act. By understanding these four assumptions, ontology, epistemology, axiology, methodology, and the frameworks they lead to, like social constructivism,
Which sees reality as built through human interaction.
or that transformative approach, you
Yeah.
suddenly get a lens. You can see through the study to the researcher's foundational choices, and that lets you analyze their findings much more critically.
Exactly. It equips you to ask better questions.
All right, so we have the operating system, the philosophical foundation. Now, what about actually designing the study? You mentioned it's like planning a journey.
Yeah, that's a great analogy from the sources. You need a plan, like a map, before you start. But you also have to be ready to detour because you're dealing with the real world, real people. It's not a controlled lab setting.
So, what makes a qualitative design distinct? What are its key features?
The sources point to four main things. First, it happens in natural settings. You study people in their own environment, their homes, workplaces, communities. Context is everything. You don't pull them out of it.
Makes sense.
Second, the researcher is the key instrument. It's not a survey form or a sensor doing the work. It's the researcher's ability to listen, observe, ask good questions, and importantly, make sense of it all. Their mind is the tool.
Okay, but hang on. If the researcher is the instrument, doesn't that bring us back to the subjectivity issue? How do we ensure it's rigorous and not just that one person's interpretation? How do they stop themselves from just finding what they expected to find?
Excellent question. This is where reflexivity comes in. It's absolutely crucial. Reflexivity is this ongoing process of critical self-reflection. The researcher has to constantly examine and be honest about how their own background, assumptions, values, biases might be shaping what they see, what they ask, and how they interpret the data.
So it's not about eliminating subjectivity, which might be impossible, but about managing it transparently, making your own influence part of the story.
Precisely. You make your own perspective visible in the final report. It's a form of intellectual honesty. And this leads to the third characteristic of the design.
Which is?
It has to be emergent. Because the researcher is learning in a real setting, the plan often needs to change. Maybe the initial research questions weren't quite right. Maybe you need to talk to different people than you first thought. The design evolves.
It adapts based on what you're finding.
Okay.
And the fourth feature.
The fourth connects back to the goal of understanding meaning. The output isn't just numbers. It's rich, detailed description, often called thick description. You don't just report what happened. You describe the context, the nuances, the layers of meaning involved, so the reader can really understand the phenomenon from the inside out.
Gotcha. Thick description. And given all this being in natural settings, the researcher as instrument dealing with potentially sensitive topics, the ethics must be huge.
Paramount. Absolutely critical. The sources really emphasize this. It goes way beyond just getting a signature on a form. Genuine informed consent means ensuring participants truly understand what they're agreeing to, the potential risks, how their data will be used. It means rigorously protecting their privacy and anonymity. And it means being incredibly sensitive to cultural differences and power dynamics between the researcher and the participants.
Right. You're dealing with people's lives, their stories, not just data points.
Exactly. It requires a deep ethical awareness throughout the entire process.
Okay, so we've got the philosophy, the design principles, the ethics. Now let's get to the practical toolkit, the 5 main approaches. You said choosing one is like picking the right lens.
That's a good way to put it. Each approach offers a different lens, designed to answer a different kind of question about the social world. We'll use some analogies to help make them memorable. Ready for number 1?
Let's do it.
Okay, first is narrative research. The focus here is squarely on the stories of individuals. The goal is usually to understand someone's identity, their life experiences over time, how they make sense of their past.
And the analogy.
Think of it like creating a biography or a memoir. You're gathering stories, moments, turning points, and weaving them together to present a coherent picture of a life or a significant part of a life.
Okay, so an example might be interviewing, say, immigrants about their journey and how they constructed their identity in a new country, focusing on their personal story arc.
Perfect example, exactly.
All right, number 2.
Second, we have phenomenology. Now, the focus shifts. It's not about one person's whole story, but about the essence of a shared lived experience. The goal is to find the common threads, the core meaning that runs through the experiences of several people who've all gone through the same thing.
Ah, this is the one with the cool analogy.
The espresso analogy, yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine taking lots of different coffee beans, individual stories, and distilling them down to find that concentrated, potent shot, the pure essence of the experience.
So instead of one person's whole life story about, say, being a caregiver, you might interview 20 caregivers and ask, what is the essential experience of being a caregiver? What does it fundamentally feel like?
Exactly. You're looking for the common structure, the shared meaning of that phenomenon. What is caregivingness?
Okay, that's clear. Approach number 3.
Number 3 is grounded theory. This one is different again. The main goal here is to build a theory directly from the data. Not test a pre-existing theory, but generate a new one. It usually aims to explain how a process unfolds, or how people navigate a particular situation or interaction. It's very process-oriented.
And the analogy for this one?
Is the sculptor. Imagine a block of stone that's your raw data, your interviews, observations. The sculptor carefully chips away, letting the form, the theory, emerge from the material itself. It's discovered within the data.
So you wouldn't start with a theory of, say, how startups succeed. You'd go observe and talk to lots of entrepreneurs. And from all that data, you'd build a model, maybe a stage model, of how that process typically works based purely on what you found.
Precisely. Or classic examples like Kathy Charmaz's work developing theories about how people cope with chronic illness based entirely on her interviews with patients. The theory is grounded in their lived reality.
Got it. Grounded theory builds theory from the ground up. Number 4.
Fourth is ethnography. This is the deep dive into culture and groups. The goal is to understand and describe the shared beliefs, values, behaviors, language, the whole way of life of a specific cultural group.
This is the one that sounds most like traditional anthropology, right?
It is. The analogy is being an anthropologist who doesn't just visit, but actually lives the culture for an extended period.
So long-term immersion is key. Months, years.
Loved. Yes.
Yeah.
You need that time to gain trust, observe daily life, participate, understand the nuances from an insider's perspective. It's not just interviews, it's participant observation.
And it doesn't have to be an exotic, faraway culture, right? Like the example of studying the culture of a specific school or even an office.
Absolutely. Harry Wolcott's famous study of a school principal is a classic example. He immersed himself in that microculture to understand the principal's world. Any group with shared practices and beliefs can be studied ethnographically.
Okay, deep immersion into culture. And the final one, number 5.
Last but not least, the case study. The focus here is an in-depth investigation of a single bounded case. Now, that case could be many things: a person, a small group, an organization, a specific event, a program, a policy implementation.
Yeah.
The key is that it's a defined system.
Bounded, meaning it has clear limits.
But-
And the analogy.
Think of writing a detective report on one specific complex case. You gather all possible evidence related to that case: interviews, documents, observations, records, artifacts, everything you can find. Your goal is to understand that single case in its real-life context, in all its complexity.
So an example might be studying one specific school that implemented a really innovative anti-bullying program. You'd look at everything about that program in that school.
Exactly. How it was designed, how teachers experienced it, how students reacted, what the outcomes were, all within the boundaries of that single case.
Okay, 5 approaches. Let's quickly recap the focus.
Sure. So narrative is individual life stories. Phenomenology is the shared essence of an experience.
Right. Grounded theory builds process theories from data. Ethnography describes cultures through immersion.
And case study does a deep dive into one bounded system. Each lens gives you a different kind of insight, answering questions that, numbers just can't.
Okay, so let's pull this all together. We started with that quote about complexity being a refuge, but by breaking down qualitative research, starting with those fundamental hidden assumptions about reality and knowing,
Ontology, epistemology.
axiology, methodology, and then looking at the specific tools, those 5 approaches, it doesn't seem so mysterious anymore. It actually looks like a very deliberate, structured, and a deeply thoughtful way to understand the human world. It's definitely not just collecting anecdotes.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And hopefully the real value for you listening is that you now have this framework. You're
Mm.
equipped. When you read research now or hear about findings, you can start to ask those critical questions. What were the researchers' underlying assumptions? Did their methods actually align with those assumptions? Which of these 5 lenses were they using, and what might they have missed by not using a different one?
Yeah, it shifts you from just taking findings at face value to really analyzing how that knowledge was created. That's incredibly empowering.
It really is.
So, to wrap up, let's leave you with a final thought to chew on, something sparked by the source materials. They note, particularly regarding narrative research, that memory is tricky, it's selective. Stories change in the telling. Now, if we accept the idea from social constructivism that reality is, at least partly, built through our interactions and stories, how much does the simple act of a researcher listening intently, asking questions, shape the participant's story as it's being told?
It's a fascinating loop.
Does that need for reflexivity for the researcher to be aware of their impact mean that qualitative research is always, in some small way, changing the reality it sets out to understand just by studying it?
A little bit of the observer effect, perhaps, but in a social context.
Something to think about. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.